Welcome everyone to another week of Ramban ala Parsha. We're up to Parshas Ki-Tetze. I'd like to do today the first three little bits. It's because not just we see them as connected, Chazal see them as connected, right? Again, the whole smichos haparshas. If you have marry an Eishes Yifas Toar, then you'll come to HaTorah, and then it'll be Ki Tiyeh Ish Shtei Nashim. And if you do that, your child will be a Ben Sor Umor. Chazal see one as leading to the other. So I want to do those three Rambans together. And one other Ramban, Kan Sipor, which at least in the Ramban ala Torah is kind of headquarters for all discussions of Ta'amei HaMitzvot. I think that kind of stands on its own because it's fascinating. But the first three are connected to each other. So why don't we do those? So the Parsha begins. Ki-Tetze la milchama lo yivecha unitano Hashem Elokecha biyadecha v'shavita shivyo. You win the war, you get captives. V'ra'ita b'shivya eshet yifat toar v'chashakta va v'lakachta lecha liisha. Right? And you see a woman and she's beautiful to you, not objectively, she may or may not be, but you find her beautiful and you desire her. V'lakachta lecha liisha. Now, obviously without reading all the psukim, although it goes on, you bring her home and you make her look ugly, at least in one telling of the parsha. She sits there and she cries for a month. Only then can you marry her, not at the beginning. Okay, now let's look at the Ramban. Obviously, the story itself is, I don't want to say bizarre, but the halacha itself is bizarre. I was zoche, for example. I am zoche to have two sons, both of whom served in the IDF. Neither of them did I sit them down before they went to the army and say, listen, I was never zoche to the mitzvah of Eishes Yifas Toar. But if you get an opportunity, it doesn't seem like that kind of mitzvah. It's hard to imagine that the Torah wants us to do the mitzvah of Eishes Yifas Toar. So let's look at the Ramban. There's a number of Rambans on Eishes Yifas Toar. I'll just pick out some. But the Ramban on Pasuk Yud Aleph says, V'hizkir hakatuv v'chashakta ba. The first thing is the Torah says you desire her. Shelo yatirana lo rak mipnei acheshek. Biyot yitzro mitgaber alav. He says the Ramban, the reason the Torah says v'chashakta ba, you desire her, is because otherwise there's nothing to discuss. The whole mitzvah is to allow you to do this if you desire her. Ela shehu rotze lakachat lo liisha lo yisa lezo. V'kach amru b'sifrei v'lakachta lecha liisha shelo toma harei ze la'aba harei ze la'achi. So the first thing the Ramban says, Eishes Yifas Toar is very personal. You have an overwhelming desire for this woman. Okay, then the halacha of Eishes Yifas Toar applies. But for you to say, I found a nice shidduch in jail, in the war, for my brother, for my father, no, it doesn't work that way. That's not the din of Eishes Yifas Toar. Okay, so it has to do with your overwhelming desire. But we could ask the following question, which is, okay, but what's the chiddush? Meaning, it's not an Isser D'Oraisa to sleep with a non-Jewish woman. It's a Drabanan, it's clear you're not supposed to do it, but it's not an Isser D'Oraisa. So what's the whole chiddush of the parsha of Eishes Yifas Toar? So let's move on to the next Ramban. And this is something that I really want to emphasize because I think most people don't see it, and the Ramban's all over this. Says the Ramban, V'hatam b'parsha hazo, mipnei shehi mitgayeret ba'al karcha. A shocking thing, says the Ramban. We know this is how Giyur works. If you want to convert, you have to be Makabel ol Malchus Shamayim, you have to be Makabel ol Mitzvos, you have to want to do this. Says the Ramban, there's an exception to that. The exception is Eishes Yifas Toar. You could do it against her will. Ve'ein shoalim ota im tachpotz la'azov data ulehit yahed. We don't ask her if she wants to be Jewish, right? The word lehit yahed, obviously in the Megillah, comes up a lot, right? You know, it means to become Jewish. Lehit yahed. Ka'asher nasa bagerim. So the Ramban, there's a form of gerus that applies to an Eishes Yifas Toar that doesn't apply anyplace else. Aval yomar la haba'al shetishmor Torat Yisrael ba'al karcha v'ta'azov yirata. Right, the soldier, the husband says, I'm forcing you to convert, I'm going to force you to convert and to leave your previous religion. So, first of all, it's a shocking thing. Again, I can't emphasize this enough. You know, nowadays in Israel, it's a huge issue, right? What's the level of commitment to Shmiras HaMitzvos that you need to convert? Here the Ramban says, you don't need anything. Now, it's true, the husband could force her in certain ways, but the idea that there's a gerus bal karcha, I think is something that most of us would find very, very surprising. But the Ramban is now going to read it into the psukim. V'zeh ta'am uvachta et avia ve'et ima. That's why you give her a month or more to cry and mourn her parents. Ki ta'azov et ama ve'et elokeha. She's leaving her past. She's leaving her God. V'hu midrashos Rabbi Akiva. Ein aviha ela avodas gilulim. Kinyan shnemar omrim la'etz avi ata u'la'even at yiladetanu. Right? We have this drush of Rabbi Akiva that people look at avodah zarah as their parents. So says the Ramban, that's what she's crying about. V'haklal. Ki hi mit'abelet al ozva et data v'tihiyela amacher. She's mourning the fact that she's being forced to join another religion, another people. V'yitachen, says the Ramban, it's possible, shebeitin matbilin ota bal karcha, kimo shosim ba'avadim. They force her to go to mikvah against her will, like they do with slaves. Slaves is not a great precedent. He's talking about an Eved Kanani who's supposed to convert and do mitzvos like a woman when he's taken, when you take him as an Eved. But the idea applies. There is another gerus that's not completely willing. Umipnei she'eina mityahedet kemishpat hirchikota katuv kol hazman hazeh. And because she's not doing it willingly and she's not converting properly, so the Torah says you have this extended period of time in which she's in your house, but you're not allowed to marry her. Okay, and again he says, V'tam ha'avelut v'habechi al dat raboteinu kidei shetitnavel ulai ya'avor cheshko mimena. Right, this is like other mefarshim. This is not lechatchila. We don't really want him to marry a woman who was forced to convert. So all the time that she sits in a house and she cries and is a machlok HaRishonim, whether her hair is cut off or her hair is grown long, her nails are cut off or her nails are grown long. But when she's sitting and crying on the floor, it's clear that she's not at her most attractive. And that's what we want, because we don't want him to marry her. And therefore, says the Ramban, the chidush of Eishes Yifas Toar is less the fact that you're allowed to sleep with her, and more the fact that there's such a thing called gerus bal karcha. Just so you'll know, there's a machlokes Rashi and Tosfos how you read the psukim. Rashi thinks that you're not allowed to sleep with her immediately. She has to go through the whole process. He meets her, he wants to sleep with her, goes through the whole process. At the end, he can sleep with her. Tosfos asks on Rashi, if that's the case, then what does it mean dibra Torah keneged Yetzirah? Right? We all know the Gemara in Kedushin, Chaf Aleph Amud Bet, the whole discussion why Eishes Yifas Toar is mutar, and the idea is im lo yatirena yisa'ena be'isur. It's almost like ki'ilu, we forced God's hand. If you're not going to be mad to this, we're going to do it anyway, right? That raises a whole bunch of questions about our relationship to mitzvos and a whole bunch of questions about the role of halacha. But at the end of the day, that's what the Gemara says. And so Tosfos asks on Rashi, where's the Yetzirah if you're not going to let him sleep with her immediately? But Rashi Shita is Rashi Shita, and we're not, Tosfos' question is a question you can answer. But the chidush of gerus ba'al karcha, I think, is the main part of Eishes Yifas Toar. Of course, part of it must be that there are mitzvos that we don't really want you to do. Right? The Ramban doesn't address it directly, but it exists. Of course, there are mitzvahs that are conditional. Right? I have to eat matzah, I have to blow shofar, I have to sit in a sukkah, I have to do all those mitzvahs, whether I'm obligated or not. Of course I'm obligated, I'm a Jew. But then there are mitzvahs like a mezuzah. If I'm homeless, I'm potter from mezuzah. There's a mitzvah like makeh. If I don't have a porch from which somebody could fall, if I don't have a swimming pool, I'm not chayv in the mitzvah of makeh. It's just not my responsibility to do that mitzvah. Turns out there's a third category of mitzvos, or I would call them dinim, right? The Rambam describes the mitzvah of din yifas toar. It's a din. The Torah doesn't want you to do it. I suppose the Torah doesn't want me to get divorced, but gerushin is a mitzvah. No, it's not a mitzvah. It's a din. Eved Kanani, Eved Ivri. I don't think the Torah really is in favor of slavery. I really don't. But I think if you live at a time where everybody has slaves, so the Torah limits your ability and requires you to do certain things to make it more moral. Okay? That's Eishis Yifas Toar. Now, the next parsha in the Torah is Ki-Tetze leish shtei nashim, ha'achat ahuva ve'achat sinua. You have two wives. One you love, one you hate. V'yaldu lo vanim ha'ahuva v'hasinua. V'haya habein ha'bechor la'siniyah. The firstborn is the wife that you hate. V'haya b'yom hanchilu et banav et asher yihiyeh lo yuchal levaker ben ha'avua al pnei ben hasinua bechor. You can't favor the son of the wife you love. Ki et ben ha-bechor ben asnua yakir, ki et ha-bechor ben asnua yakir latet lo pi shnayim. He gets a double portion, b'chol asher yimatzei lo, ki hu reishit ono lo mishpat ha-bechora. So first of all, even before we get to the Ramban, it's hard to read this, and the words especially without thinking of Yaakov and Rachel and Leah. Right? The Torah describes Leah as snua and Rachel as ahuva, and in fact, Yosef is the son of Rachel, and Reuven is the son of Leah. Okay, I'm just raising that because I think it's a fascinating topic, but we're not going to deal with that right now. What are we going to deal with? So the Ramban says as follows. Lo yuchal levaker ben ha'ava. First of all, just to know, the double portion that the Bechor gets is not a double portion objectively. It means if you have 4 sons, then you split it into 5, and he gets twice as much as everybody else, but he doesn't get 50% of your property. Okay, now the Ramban. Lo yuchal levaker ben ha'ava. Azhara shelo ya'aseh v'chein kulam. It's an interesting linguistic point, but it's a really a great one. What does the Torah mean? Lo yuchal levaker ben ha'ava. I can do anything I want. I have bechira chavsh, so of course I can. So Ramban says, no, you see this language in the Torah, it doesn't mean you don't have the ability. It means you don't have the permission. Azhara shelo ya'aseh. It's a warning. Of course you can, but you're not supposed to. V'chein kulam, all examples of this in the Torah. Lo tuchal le'echol bisharecha. Why can't? Why can't I? Because the Torah says you can. Lo tuchal lateit alecha ish nachriya shelo achichahu. In terms of a king. Of course you could, but the Torah doesn't give you permission. It's really kind of a deep point, right? In the Ramban's reading, if the Torah says it's asur, it means you can't. Of course physically you can. But you can't in the sense that the Torah doesn't want you to. Va'amar onkelos bekulam les lach rishus. You don't have permission. And if you don't have permission, you can't do it. It's really like a mindset that, if the Torah told me I can't do this, so I can't do it. I really could. Okay, that's how the Torah works. Vahatam lo titein yecholet lenafshecha la'asot kacha. I can't allow myself to do it. V'hu maflig ba'azhara. Right? It's a way of the Torah either exaggerating or scaring you or, to not do a lo taseh. It doesn't just tell you you're not supposed to. It tells you you can't. You can't means you're not allowed to. V'chein, ki et ha-bechor ben asnua yakir latet lo pi shnayim. Mitzvat aseh shiyanchilenu pi shnayim. It's a mitzvah aseh that the bechor gets a double portion. V'hinei hamashvet ha-bechor le'echav benachalato over below taseh v'aseh. Therefore, if you give the same portion to the bechor and to the other sons, you're in violation of an aseh and a lo saseh. V'af al pi she'ein dvarav kaimim badin. And of course, it won't matter. It won't hold up. Why? You're what we call a masna al masha kasav b'Torah. The Torah said you're not allowed to do it. You decided to do it. What you said doesn't matter. Because halacha governs us and not your desire. So you love the younger son more. It's okay. It doesn't help. V'af al pi she'ein dvarav kaimim badin. Right? It won't happen. It's like the Torah says. Lo yuchal, you're not allowed to, and therefore it doesn't matter. You can't do it. V'kol shekenim lo ratzal lo diashu bechor. If he hides the fact, okay, it's a problem. Now there are halachic ways bizman hazeh. In other words, to set up a system where your children get exactly what you want them to get. But mitzad adin in the Torah, this is how it's supposed to work. Okay, so the Ramban here has this interesting idea that lo yuchal lavaket ben ha'ava means almost literally you're not allowed to, and therefore you don't have the ability to. Okay, that's ben ha'ava, ben ha'snua, and again, the parallels to Yosef and Reuven and Rachel and Leah, I'll leave to you, but it's a fascinating one, and I think the Torah wants us to do that, especially, it says the word ono, which is how the Torah describes Reuven also. Okay, but if all these things happen, if you take an Eish Yifas Toar and you hate her, we come to the next parsha. Ki hiyeh ish bein so'er u'moreh einenu shomeh b'kol aviv v'kol imo v'yisru tov v'lo yishma alehem. Okay, you get a ben so'er u'moreh. Everybody knows that the Gemara says there lo hayav v'lo yiyeh v'lo nivra. There won't be a ben so'er u'moreh, but that's not what the Ramban focuses on. The Ramban focuses on what allows us to punish this person. It's clear that a ben so'er u'moreh is punished in an exaggerated sense. There's nothing you could find that would be a chiyuv misa on a ben so'er u'moreh, even in theory. But the Ramban wants to make sure he's chayiv something. Like, what's the sin that even in an exaggerated sense becomes a chiyuv misa? But what did he do wrong? So it's fascinating. So first he says, al dat raboteinu eino katan. Chazal say he's not a katan. Why? Sheha katan patur mikol onshin shebatorah. Umikol hamitzvos. Aval hu hamevi shtei sarot. V'hine yesh alav shnei onshin. So first he says, the child, the ben so'er u'moreh who we're punishing, must be physically mature. He must be a child who we could be mechayiv in averos, right? He has a sense of, not just a sense of obligation, but the halacha applies to him. If he's 11 years old, maybe the halacha doesn't apply to him. He's a katan. But says the Ramban, we obviously are talking about somebody who's a bar onshin, otherwise the whole thing wouldn't make sense. Now, fascinating part. What are the two averos that the Ramban points to? And I'll tell you in advance, he points to things that perhaps you and I wouldn't think are averos, so at least the first one. Ha'echad, he says, shehu makle aviv v'imo umamre bahem. I'm sorry, the first one we do know. He's disrespectful to his parents. Okay, what's the onus for that? Not sure. That's one avera. He says, v'hasheni shehu zolel v'soveh. He's a glutton. Okay, what's the avera for being a glutton? Over al mashenitstavenu kidoshim tihiyu. Says Ramban, no, that's what I told you in Kedoshim. Maybe the most famous Ramban ever. He's a naval b'rshus HaTorah. Okay, so he's unethical. No, says the Ramban, naval b'rshus HaTorah, violation of Kedoshim tihiyu, that's a real Isser Torah. And he's violating it. V'nemar od. Now he's going to expand on it, but it really teaches us a lesson. The Torah says, Voto ta'avodu uvot hidbakun. You're supposed to worship HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You're supposed to cleave to Him. Shenitztavenu ladat Hashem b'chol drachenu. It's a real mitzvah. And says the Ramban, V'solel v'sovei lo yeda derech Hashem. It's not just a nice thing that you should think about God, that you should want to feel close to God. It's a mitzvah satorah. And if you're a zolel v'sovei, you're in violation of that mitzvah satorah. V'alaklal ein bo ata chet mavet. It's true. Right now, there's no capital crime. He didn't do anything that would require the death penalty. V'al shem sofo hu nidon. Right? The Gemara says the same thing. He's being punished for his future. Kamoshis kiu rabotenu. What does this mean? V'zeh ta'am v'chol Yisrael yishma'u v'yirau. Now the Ramban moves on to a second problem. One is what he's being punished for. So Ramban says he is being punished for doing averos. They're not a chiyuv misa, but they are averos. Second thing, but why does the Torah say v'chol Yisrael yishmu v'yirau? Why does it have to be done publicly? Why does everybody have to see? This is interesting. Says Ramban, ki lo hu mas bigodel cheto. He's not being charged because he's a murderer. He's not being publicly killed because of the severity of his crime. Ela liyaser bo et harabim. Says the Ramban, it's what we would call in English deterrence. It's true, he's not getting the appropriate onesh for his avera, but it's deterrence. Why do we want to deter people? V'shelo yiyeh takala la'acherim. Because he's a threat to the system. A person who rejects Torah completely, who rejects his parents completely, that's really, really bad for the system. The system works if children respect their parents and if they have a relationship and there's a mesorah. V'chein derech hakatuv sheyazhir kein kasher yamutu ligeder kidei shetiyeh b'mitatam takana l'acherim. Says the Ramban, in my words, whenever you see in the Torah, V'chol Yisrael, V'chol ha'am yishma'u v'yirau, it's because there's a threat to the system. Not because the chait is so chamur, but because there's a threat to the system. Look at the examples. Ki hizkir kein b'zakein mamrei. Now, what's a zakein mamrei? He's on the Bezdin Hagadol. He just disagrees with their psak. Why is he going to be killed? Lefi she'ein b'horato chait shehiyeh ra'ui lamut bo. Right? It's not a capital crime. Rak hu lahasir machloket min haTorah. But the system won't work. If Bezdin Hagadol is not the final word, nobody's going to trust in the system. Nobody's going to know what the halacha is. So therefore, kol ha'am yishmu v'yirau, when he's put to death, because he is a threat to the system. V'chein be'edim zomimin. Right? We have a system. We want to rely on two edim as if it's the absolute truth. But if people are going to come to court and make stuff up, right? So he says, sheneharagim v'lo harago. They're killed even though they didn't kill anybody. They're killed if they try to kill somebody. Same issue there. V'chein iskir b'meisit, an insider to avodah zarah. The Ramban goes on to say, the people didn't even do it. It doesn't matter. There are chata'im that fit into a category where they're threats to the system. And if they're a threat to the system, says the Ramban, then the Torah says, kill them publicly, v'chol ha'am yishma'u v'yirau, v'lo yizidun la'asot od kadavar hazeh, etc., etc. So it's not the severity of the crime. The Ramban sees the problem with Ben Sorer Umorer as being the threat to the system. The threat to the system has to be punished severely and has to be punished publicly so that other people don't do it. Okay, so far we've done the three opening parshiot in the Torah, Eish Zifas Toar, Ki-Tetze Leish Shetei Nashim, and Ben Sorer Umorer. The connections you'll have to do on your own, but the thematic connections are clear. Now, let's go for our last Ramban to the mitzvah of Kan Sipor. Says the Torah, I'm in Perek Chavbet, Pasuk Vav, Ki karei Kan Sipor lefanecha baderech b'choletzu al haaretz, efrochim o beitzim, v'aim rovetz al efrochim o al beitzim, lo tikach ha'im al abanim, rather, shaleach tishalach et ha'im. Okay, so first of all, most of us, for no good reason, are in love with the mitzvah of Kan Sipor. Oh, it's true. It says va'arachta yamim, right? The schar you get for Kan Sipor is arichus yamim, which is why people, I was once in Borough Park, and there's signs up, you could hire somebody who'll find you a Kan Sipor, and then you could be yotzei in the mitzvah by sending the mother away. I think this is completely wrong. Rishonim think it's completely wrong. There are some Rishonim who think it's an isser, but it's a lav anitak la'aseh. If you happen to want the eggs to eat, so at least send away the mother bird, so you won't be over, or to fix the lo taseh of taking the eggs. But really, there's no benefit to it, and nobody wants it, and you shouldn't do it. Why there's a reward of arichus yamim, I don't know. That you'll have to figure out on your own. But let's look at the Ramban. Let's do ta'amei mitzvot, because it's a fascinating topic. So first of all, says the Ramban, Gam zo mitzvah mevoret mino tova et beno lo tishchatu b'yom achad. It's not a new mitzvah in Devarim. It's of a type with the fact that you're prohibited from killing the mother cow and the baby cow on the same day. Ki atam bishnehem, because they're related. Levilti heyot lanu lev achzari v'lo nerachem. Says the Ramban, the real reason is you don't want to be arrogant, you don't want to be haughty, you don't want to be hard-hearted. You want to be merciful. It's a mean thing to do to kill the child and the mother. Second possibility, O shelo yatira katuv lasod hashchata la'akor hamin af al pi she'itira shlita b'min hahu. Or the Torah doesn't want you, the extinguishing of a species is a terrible thing. The Rav used to say each individual animal doesn't matter, but to get rid of a whole type of animals, a whole species, when God created that species for whatever reason, that's a problem. So killing the mother and the son sounds like, and taking the eggs and getting rid of the eggs and shooing off the mother, it sounds like you're uprooting the whole species, even though the Torah is matir shchita, but they're individual, not the whole species. V'hinei hahoreg ha'em v'habanim biyom echad o lokech otam biyot lahem dror la'uf. If you take the mother and the eggs when the mother could easily fly away, ki'ilu yachrit haminahu. It's like you're extinguishing the whole species. Okay, so the Ramban says, despite the Gemara that talks about a person who says to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, have rachamim on me, like you had rachamim on the Kantzipor, that's a problem with your tefillah. The Ramban ignores that for now, and he says, no, the reason for Kantzipor is either destroying a whole species, or it will make you hard-hearted. The Rambam agrees. He doesn't have to agree with the Ramban. He came first. V'kasav b'mor nevuchim, says the Rambam in the Moreh, ki ta'am shiluach hakan v'tam oto ve'et beno lo tishchatu b'yom echad kidei lahazhir shelo yishchot habein be'inei ha'em. Now, the reason is you don't want to shech the child in front of the mother. Why? This is fascinating stuff. Ki yesh lebehemot da'aga gidola b'zeh. Because animals have feelings. Ve'ein hefresh ben da'agat ha'adam le'da'agat ha'behemot al b'neihem. Ki ahavat ha'em v'chanota livnei bitna einenu nimshach acharei ha'seichel v'hadibur. The Rambam knows that animals don't talk. Right? Nevertheless, the Rambam says there's a level of feeling in an animal that has nothing to do with the ability to communicate. And a mother cow feels terrible for their child. And God forbid you kill the child in front of the mother. It's a cruel thing to do. Right? The ability to feel terrible, or to feel sad, or to feel connected to your child, it's almost instinctive. Animals have that. V'im kain, ein ikar ha'isur ba'oto ve'et b'no rak b'bno va'oto, says the Ramban. Well, if that were the case, it would just be usher to shecht the child in front of the mother. Okay, but nevertheless, the gzeira is the gzeira and the halacha is the halacha. But says the Ramban, v'yoter nachon ba'avu shalom nitachzer. The Rambam thinks the beneficiary of the mitzvah of Kantzipor is the animal. The Ramban says at the end of the day, I still think I'm right, that it's for our benefit. What's our benefit? Our benefit means it'll make me a better person. And the Ramban, we're going to run out of time, so I'll just tell you this. It's a long Ramban, but it's really worth reading. The Ramban gets to the point where he says, the Rambam says there are two shitos. There's Tamei HaMitzvos, and there's people who don't care about Tamei HaMitzvos. And we paskin like the people who care about Tamei HaMitzvos, and every single mitzvah has a ta'am. Says the Ramban, no, there's really only one shita. The people who say that that's not the reason for the mitzvah, they're saying that because it's not for God's benefit. They're saying every single mitzvah, the beneficiary is me. Well, how do I benefit? It teaches me some kind of character trait that I wouldn't otherwise have. It does something good for the world. God is not hungry. He doesn't need a carbon. God doesn't need any of these things. But God wants us to be better people. Therefore, God gave us the mitzvos. Okay, so let's stop here. So Tamei HaMitzvos was in Kantzipor. The Rambam obviously believes that everything has a reason. The Ramban also believes so. The Rambam thinks it's a machlokas. The Ramban thinks it's not. All mitzvos have reasons. The beneficiary of all mitzvos is us, not God. Plus the first three Rambans that we saw at the beginning of the parsha. Hope this was helpful. Have a great week and a Shabbat Shalom.